Welcome to the Pursuit of Growth show, where we hold candid conversations with fascinating individuals from all walks of life. We learn about their passions and successes, their failures, their lessons learned, and how they apply personal growth to their lives. We end all of our conversations with key takeaways that we can all implement to better ourselves. And I'm going to stop right there and start over. That's the first time ever.
First time we've ever had to do that.
First time ever. All right, so let me.
Cletus, you're making Sammy nervous.
Yeah. Oh, please don't get nervous on my part.
All right, I'll do it one more time. And
I might catch it down again.
Yep.
You ready?
Let's do it.
And 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to the Pursuit of Growth show, where we hold candid conversations with fascinating individuals from all walks of life. We learn about their passions, their successes and failures, their lessons learned, and how they apply personal growth to their lives. We end all of our conversations with key takeaways that we can all implement to better ourselves and the lives of those around us. As always, I'm joined by my good buddy, my co-host, my pal, Greg Brinkley. Greg, how are you doing this evening?
And Sammy, I'm good. And like we talked about last night as we were preparing for this show, I am extremely excited to welcome our guest, Cletus Judge, to the Pursuit of Growth show. Cletus, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Thank y'all for having me tonight.
Absolutely. Well, Cletus Judge, the reason why I'm so excited, you're going to hear a little bit about him in his introduction that I'm going to read. Cletus is originally from a small town just south of Mobile, Alabama called Stockton. He was raised by his grandparents. His grandfather worked as a farmer, and his grandmother was a domestic worker for a family. They instilled in him a work ethic and an obligation to seek higher education, which he took and graduated from the University of South Alabama in 1987 with a degree in political science and a minor in military science. He was commissioned a second lieutenant through the ROTC program while in college, and he also holds an MBA from the University of Dallas he achieved in 2001. Cletus joined the Dallas Police Department in September of 1987 and retired in May of 2018. He worked with several units within the department, including an instructor at the police academy for 9 years. He was a robbery detective for 2 years, sergeant in capers, and his last 5 years, he served as a sergeant in homicide. Cletus is currently an administrator at Dallas College over the police academy. He has been married to his wife, Marietta Judge, for 26 years, has 2 adult sons and an 8-year-old grandson. His family are members of St. Luke Community Church here in Dallas. Cletus, again, welcome to the show. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Once again, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be with you all today, and I'm just excited about your questions, and don't mind talking about myself. Okay.
Very good. Well, we're going to jump in and throw you a fastball, Cletus. We're coming strong with questions right now.
Okay.
So as a retired police officer and homicide detective, we'd love to know, what is your favorite police or detective movie that you've seen, and tell us why.
Okay, my favorite movie is called The Bone Collector, and it's one of Denzel Washington's first movie. And if you notice anything, Denzel's played about 13 roles as a police officer in 13 different movies. And The Bone Collector, he was actually he was in a wheelchair. Actually, he was in a bed. And he was still serving as a detective, and I can't remember the actress that played with him, but he was solving crimes from the bed, and actually, using his detective and using all his insights to solve these murder. And they actually caught the guy, and the guy actually turned on him, and he actually fought the guy off because the guy backtracked and came to his house. That's one of my favorite movies, The Bone Collector. And I'm telling you, and I know you didn't ask, but my favorite TV show, and I think it's probably one of the most realistic TV shows, is going to be Law and Order, the SUV. That's my favorite show, police show, and it's very realistic, very realistic. And I think that's probably the closest thing that you'll see to real police work.
What do you notice when you watch TV shows or you see movies? What are some of the things that stick out to you as being completely unrealistic?
Okay, there's one show, I won't call the name, but one of the things is like they get someone's driver's license And they actually, next thing you know, they know where the person is just by looking at their driver's license. And that's not realistic. And, actually always being Johnny on the spot and actually, hey, walking down the street, there's the suspect right there. That doesn't happen. And that's, that's one of the things that I look at from the standpoint of being realistic, how things just haphazardly happen. And, but I'll tell you, some of those TV shows are just not, things just don't happen like that. And a lot of times, a lot of people look at those and they think that, hey, the police can do that. The police can do that. But I will tell you, one thing that does help police more than anything is this thing right here, the cell phone. Have y'all ever left home without this?
Only by mistake, right?
And if you do, don't you turn around and go get it?
100% of the time.
Okay, guess what? Murders, thieves, and robbers do the same thing. They take this phone with them everywhere they go. And this has been one of the biggest and the best tools that police officers, detectives have to use right now is these cell phones. And it works for police officers.
That's fascinating. I'm glad you segued into the Law and Order SVU because my wife is a huge fan. I think she's been watching it as long as I've known her, and we've been married 10 years and we dated for 6 years before that. So I know that show very well. And there's a couple of different shows that we watched in our past. First 48 was a big one, big detective show. And I found that one fascinating because it really showed you kind of that day-to-day ins and outs of the kind of the police work, obviously glamorized a little bit for TV as well. But what is it with police in pop culture? It's something that we've talked about. Greg and I were trying to think about too, is also, what is it about? It seems that women are really drawn to those types of shows. What is it about that?
I think one of the things is that these shows, when you look at, especially the ones that are on TV, they always, they always show the glamorous part of life. Very seldom do you see the, the people, you might see the ghetto stories, but, a lot of these people are victims, are living high life. They're living in nice surroundings. They're members at country clubs and things like that. So I think that's one of the attractive things. And then with that comes, the expensive wardrobes, the fast cars, the beautiful homes. So I think that's one of the reasons why women are attracted to these shows, not necessarily for the crime itself, but all the trappings that go around the whole show. And if you look at these shows, especially, some of the SUVs, you got attorneys that are involved in the shows. You have, affluent people, and you look at their surroundings, and that's kind of attractive. I know that's what my wife likes. We'll be looking at SUV, and she goes, "Man, look at that coat that she has on." And I go, "I didn't notice the coat, baby." But I noticed that about my wife. She especially is very in tune to the what the women are wearing, the jewelry that they have on, things like that, and if their house is decorated beautifully. That's one of the things that she keys in on. And I think that's probably why women are so attracted to these shows.
Cletus, a show that ran for decades on Fox was a show called Cops.
Mm-hmm.
How realistic was that show? It was advertised, it was set up as a reality TV type show. Did you watch that? And just kind of what were your general thoughts when you saw any of those episodes?
I watched it a couple of times, but I really think a lot of that was orchestrated. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of things were, some of those people were actors and are paid to, and I just didn't think, to me, I'm just going to be honest, it made some of the police look like buffoons. And, mm-hmm. and I was really not a fan of that show because it really didn't do anything for us, for police officers. And it was very unrealistic. Some of it was funny. Some of the suspects were funny. Things that the cops did were so. Mm-hmm. I thought it was more of a show of entertainment than rather, giving real life, stories about what's going on in the world today. I really was not a fan of that show.
Well, a couple of rapid fire questions I have for you, Cletus.
Sure.
One, have you ever been in a car police chase?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Can you elaborate on what that looked like and how it ended?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, it was I was working in patrol, and I was a field training officer, which is what we call an FTO, which you train rookies. And once we got behind a stolen vehicle, and I'm not going to tell you about that. That was not funny. I'll tell you about the one that when I was a rookie and we were chasing this car. I had a trainer, and this guy was notorious for catching stolen cars. He just had a knack for it. He's retired now. and he would we'd be working deep nights when deep nights is like 11 to 7 in the morning or 12 to 8. And I'd be driving around and this guy would be asleep. I mean, literally sleep. And he just wake up, he goes, and he kind of stutter. He goes, turn on that car right there. Turn on that car. And I'd turn on the car. I'd turn, get behind the car. That car would start traveling fast. And the next thing I know, he's put the license plate inside the computer. Car comes back stolen. He actually got an award by the Rotary Club in the Pleasant Grove area for catching so many cars. And they actually gave him on the weekends, he would get a Jaguar from a dealership for catching all these cars. And on that particular night, I chased this car and the driver lost control of this vehicle and ran into a house.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody was at home. And so when they hit the house, the driver bailed out, left the car there. And so, we towed the car off, didn't catch the guy. And about 2 weeks later, the owners of the house called me and said, hey, we noticed that there was a police report made about our car and, a car was inside our house. And what do you know about that? And I said, well, it was a stolen car and they ran into your house. He goes, did y'all catch him? I go, no, we did not. And so they were kind of mad about that. But that car ended up in their house, stolen car. So that was when I was a rookie at that time. Jeez.
Okay, part two of my rapid questions. Kind of going into pop culture, we see some amazing fist fights and karate kicks and cops and robbers falling over, rolling down hills. Have you ever had like an altercation where you and a suspect had to get after it in some kind of like physical confrontation?
Oh, yes. And one of the things that I'm telling you, man, like I told you in the bio, I actually worked at the police academy for 9 years as an instructor. And what I taught was what we call defensive tactics. And I actually taught cadets how to fight. And so I love, there's nothing like practicing your craft in real life. So, I love to do stuff. And I'd be on the streets and just waiting for somebody to say, oh, I got something I want to show you or something I want to practice on. And if you ever remember, you notice how you always see police officers doing these moonlighting, what we call moonlighting, working at, I used to work at a lot of clubs.
Right.
And there is nothing like a drunk that, and they won't take no for an answer. They won't take your directions. So I used to practice a lot of my stuff at the clubs. And one night we had this guy and we told him to leave. And he came back to our car and he said, why do I have to go? And I said, look, man, you're intoxicated. You need to leave. And then he cursed us and he slammed the car door to the police car. So I got out of the car and I did what we call an angle kick. And the angle kick is when we kick them right on their what we call a common peroneal, which is like the upper thigh area. And I kicked this guy so hard and he fell down. And by the time we called police on duty to come pick him up, took him about an hour to get there. And he was handcuffed. And when the police got there, he was still limping. He still couldn't walk. And I kicked him that hard. I never forget that. But I did put him in jail. But he was just intoxicated, would not listen. And just, when people are under the influence of alcohol and drugs, man, their understanding is what we say is bad understanding.
Yeah. Well, Cletus, my third question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Sammy. But I should also probably preference you're sitting down, but when you stand up, you are a big man. So I imagine a kick from you probably definitely will leave a mark for several days, if not weeks or months.
Well, I can say this one thing real quick is that that is my number one takeaway from this show already is learn the angle kick. I'm going to research that.
Yeah. I love it. Well, my third question for you, Cletus, is if they made a cop movie about you and you got to pick your buddy, what actor would you pick to be like your buddy cop?
Oh, man. I'm telling you, man, who would I pick? I tell you, if I would pick Denzel, man.
Yeah.
I would pick Denzel Washington, man. He's so cool. He's just a cool guy, man. I like all his movies.
He's actually my favorite actor of all time. It's just perfect. Yeah.
He's a cool guy.
So in saying with that, we've been having a lot of fun with these police and pop culture questions. So I had a burning question that I had to ask you. So and pardon my French, I will use one piece of language that may get us censored. But in the movie Lethal Weapon, uh, Danny Glover's character was kind of the elder statesman, let's just say, right?
Yes.
And his famous line was, "I'm getting too old for this shit."
Yeah.
But
Yes.
the thing about it was, in that movie, he was 40 years old. And
Yeah.
so I'm 40 years old. And so I was just wondering, did you ever have a moment when you realized that you were getting too old for this shit?
Oh yes, yes. And it was not. It was when I was chasing somebody, in the woods, and I was just wore out, man. I probably actually said I'm getting too old for this, but it was just actually chasing these, some young kids through the woods, and I realized, I go, if I don't catch these people quick, I mean, like in 2 or 3 minutes, I'm done. I'm just done. And that's when I said I needed to go get on the desk somewhere. And that's when I, went to the because I stayed at the police academy for about 9 years. And I had a great time. I really enjoyed working at the police academy, training cadets. And actually, that was one of the things, one of the requirements was that you had to stay in good shape. And so I got to work out all the time. And, I was just a fitness guru then. And so I really enjoyed that. But like I said, I do remember I was on the streets, because one thing they would do is me and my partner, a friend of mine, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago, the chief mandated that didn't matter where you worked at, you could work in the office, but 2 weeks out of the year you were going to work on the streets. And so one day, me and my partner, me and an old friend of mine, we chose to go work on the streets together, and we were in Oak Cliff, and it was early Sunday morning, and we got a call about a female that was high on drugs. And we were like, man, we can handle this. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. We just had our coffee, and we go to this house, and we go here, and the grandmother meets us at the door, and she tells us, my granddaughter's, she's on something, she's on that whack, what she said, and she's high, and so she won't do what we ask her to do. So she came out the door, and she was naked. I mean, completely naked and sweating profusely. And so me and my partner, we were trying to gather her and put handcuffs, and she was just slipping through our hands. And I was like, and so another element showed up, and 2 more officers, and we finally got on the ground, and I looked over at my friend, and we were just sweating. We were like, we got to get out of here. And it was like, we were talking about quitting, but we were like, I'm so glad we don't have to do this, stay in patrol. But I never forget that. That girl wore us out. She's about 25 years old, but we could not get hands on her. She was just sweating and just slippery, That was funny.
Oh man, those are great stories.
Well, Cletus, one of the things that Sammy and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and we mentioned this when we introduced you, was growing up in South Alabama, and you grew up with your grandparents. We'd love to hear a little bit about that experience, and really what you learned from your grandparents, the disciplines, just the mindset, the things they taught you, and really what led you into your college and the degree you chose.
Okay. Well, actually, like I said, my grandparents raised me. My mom was a single mother, and we lived in, I was born in Alabama, but my mom moved to Newark, New Jersey. And I was about 8 or 9 years old, and we were having a really tough time in New Jersey. And we were, living really bad. We lived in a brownstone. My mom had a job, single mom, 3 kids, and we were just living really bad. We were struggling. And I never forget that my grandfather and my uncle showed up one day with a U-Haul, and they packed us up and they took us back to Alabama. And so that's how I, met my grandparents, and we lived with them. And my grandfather was a hardworking man, very hard. He worked for some farmers. We didn't own, we had a little farm of our own where we grew fruits and vegetables for our own consumption. And we sold watermelons, but my grandfather worked for some more people. And I never forget that he worked 6 days a week. And only on Saturdays, he worked from 6. He'd work in the evening, going in the morning at 6 a.m. and he would come home about 6:30 at night. And he worked like that every day. I mean, he worked like that until he was about 75 years old. And I never forget that on Saturdays, he would only work a half a day. He would work from like 6 to 12. And that would be the day that we'd go to town and do our shopping for groceries and stuff like that. My grandmother worked for a family, and she was a domestic. And I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Help. You all remember that movie?
I do remember that movie, yes.
Yeah. And that movie reminds me of my grandmother and how she'd worked. But she worked for a very nice family. I'll never forget these people. They were very nice to us. And she actually worked for the man and his wife. They had children, but the guy was an attorney. His wife died at an early age. And my grandmother practically raised that man's kids. I mean, she raised those kids. And so the mother, it was a daughter and a young man. And because the lawyer didn't have anybody else. So, you know, my grandmother was their mother. And so she spent a lot of time with that family. And when he died, and the young lady, she became an adult, and, you know, she went off to college, she came back, she married, and my grandmother continued to work for her. And so these people were very nice to us. And I never forget, the last thing was that they were gauzes. And even like when my grandmother, I never forget this, when my grandmother passed and we were at the funeral, I had a lot of cousins come, and they go, who are all these white people? And we're at the funeral, and I go, that's grandma's other family. And and they literally were her other family because she raised them. And, you know, we developed a very good relationship with them, and, you know, very nice people. And they treated my grandmother like, you know, they really loved her, and they treated her very nice. But my grandparents were really big on education, and I spent a lot of time at church you know, every Sunday we were at church and everything. But they really, you know, instilled in me that, hey, if you want to change your surroundings, if you want to change the way you live, you're going to have to get an education. So I was pretty smart in high school, and actually I started college when I was 17. I graduated. I was still in high school, and I enrolled in college, and at a junior college before I graduated. And I left there, and I went to the University of South Alabama, and I, you know, stayed there. And I was just really didn't know. I actually enrolled when I started. I was a biology major, and I really, you know, I really enjoyed biology and chemistry, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked, you know, the sciences. But I could not pass differential equations, and I kept struggling. I took that class 3 times and couldn't pass. And so I went over to my advisor and said, "Hey, man, I see some people that came here with me that are gone." And, you know, they started college for me. So I said, I need to get out of here. So I changed my major to political science, and I, you know, graduated. Also, when I was a junior, I enrolled in ROTC. And I'm going to tell you why I got in ROTC, because it was extra money. And they said, you know, if you enrolled in ROTC, you get $100 stipend from the government. And I was also, they had this thing they call the SMP program, where you could be in the reserves at the same time, and I would be an officer. So I got money from there, and that's the only reason why I got it in the ROTC. And then I didn't realize when I graduated, they said, "Hey, you got to serve some time in the reserves. You got to do 6 years in the reserves when you graduate from college." So I ended up doing 16 years in the reserves. Okay. Wow. And so I did not retire. I got 20 years. I got 16 years, but I didn't retire. But that's how I got in the military. And one of the things that just to go back a little bit, but I met my father when I was a senior in college. I met my dad. Wow. And so and I really didn't know the story behind my my mother and my father, and I found it out later. And my father was not a bad guy, but what happened was my father had got my mother pregnant at an early age, and my grandfather, who loved his daughter, practically ran my father off and just told him, said, "Hey, we don't need you. I don't need you to do anything." And my father joined the military, and he made a career. My father actually retired 33 years in the Army, and command sergeant major. So when I graduated from college, and before I came to I had been here in the police department for about 2 years, and the Army called me and said, "Hey, you need to go active duty." So my father was actually stationed in Washington, D.C., working at the Pentagon. So I actually chose to go to Norfolk, Virginia, and I did my officer basic course in Newport News, Virginia. And so on the weekends, I would go and stay with my parents, my father and my stepmom. And so we really developed a really good relationship afterwards. But I really did not know the story behind that. And one thing and I'm not sure, I'll just speak from the culture in the Black community. There are a lot of secrets, and people just keep quiet, and people don't talk about things. And like I said, I didn't know the story behind my father, and good man, but my grandfather I love my grandfather, but he told my father, we don't need you. I don't need you to do anything. I'm gonna take care of both of them. And my father tried to spend time with me, but he ended up joining the Army, enlisted in the Army, and made a career out of it. But after, like I said, when I graduated from college, we developed a good relationship. And I just lost my father about 3 years ago, and they were living in D.C. area. But like I said, he retired from the military. And my stepmom lives in Augusta, Georgia. We still talk and we visit all the time. But that was one of the biggest things that happened in my life. And like I said, but I had a lot of love from my grandfather, my mother's brother, and a cousin that actually helped rear me. They were the men in my lives that helped instill, and one of the biggest things that I take away from that is that my grandfather taught me is that you take care of your family, you provide for your family, and you do what needs to be done to provide for your children and for your immediate family. And so I live that today, and I tell and my wife, she's always saying, you work so hard. I say, I like working, but I think it's my obligation to provide for my family. And
Cletus, what was it like when your dad first connected with you? Do you remember how that first conversation went, and how did you respond to that? Kind of seeing him for maybe the first time, and gosh, since you were a small child.
Yeah, well, when we first met, it was kind of a contentious meeting, and he really didn't tell me the story, and at first, and then I was like, I'll tell you, when I first met him, I was 22, 21, 22 years old in college, and I really hey man, you've been absent. The only thing you can do for me is give me money. That's all I want, And he told me, he said, well, I like to, I don't mind helping you and giving you stuff, but I would like to develop a relationship with you. And I said, it's a little late for that. And, but we got past that with the help of my stepmom. She was a really, really big part. And we developed a very close relationship. And I mean, I would go to DC all the time, stay with, visit them. And like I said, I chose Norfolk to go there just because they lived in the DC area. It's only about a 2.5 hour drive. And so we developed a really good relationship, always to the end. I mean, to the very end. And so I learned a lot from my dad, and same that work ethic. My dad, he worked in the military for 33 years. Then once he retired, he started working for a defense contractor, and he did that for about 5 years. And he just finally stopped working. And I could, when I would go visit him, he was just bored. I mean, he worked all his life, and that's all he knew. And he had a hard time relaxing and just chilling, And I told him I would go down to, we live right down the street from Andrews Air Force Base. And I was playing golf down there. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I know you don't golf, but there's a lot of guys down there that you can just hang out with, play dominoes, just talk. But he really had a hard time adjusting to not working.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're kind of cut from that same cloth from the genetic standpoint, being that you like to stay active, and
yes.
And you said you enjoy work, and I think that's something that the three of us shares. A lot of people see a lot of the work that we do and the extra effort that we put into everything we do to try and achieve a lot of opportunities to help other people as well. But I think that that's something that is resounding in your answer, is that you are one to put in that extra time, the energy and effort, and probably because you just like doing it.
Yes. And I enjoy working. And like I said, when I retired, I was 53 from the Dallas Police Department. And I knew, and I had some friends go, hey, if you're going to go back to work, why did you retire? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I wanted to retire from the police department because I knew that there was something else that I can do. and I wanted to explore. I didn't, like I always tell people, I don't want on my tombstone police officer. That's it. He never did anything else. But that's why when and actually when I first retired, I actually worked for Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson for about 6 months. I was an aide to her. I worked for her for about 6 months, and then a friend from my church called me about the job at Eastville College, and it was really, I'm tied to police training, but I'm really, I'm not a police officer. I mean, I'm still a certified peace officer, but I don't wear a uniform or anything like that. But this still is training that I'm involved in, and I also got the opportunity to put some of my management skills that when I was in graduate school. Some of those things I got an opportunity to put in use, and so being an administrator at the college level, and so I'm very happy with what I'm doing right now, and I tell people all the time, retirement is overrated. People think, oh, I just can't wait till I retire. I go, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. Especially person.
I'm 43 and probably a long ways away from what most people would consider retirement. Whenever that gets brought up to me, Cletus, I tell people realistically, I don't see myself ever retiring. I'll change what I'm doing.
Yes.
I feel like we all need to have purpose. And when you stop living with purpose, man, I feel like you stop living. And I think you see that with people that, when they stop doing their job, in many cases, if that's all they had that was tied to like their purpose, you see them fall down here really quickly. And so that's why I think Sammy and I, and you sound like you're cut from the same cloth. There's a lot of things that we like to be involved with. There's a lot of things that we find value in. And I think, one of those major emphasis for us is helping and serving other people. Yes. And I want to be doing that until the day that I die. Like, I fully believe that that's going to be my case. And I feel like you're cut from the same cloth.
Yes. And I like, one of the things I tell people all the time, is I've worked with several nonprofits. And when I first, I don't know if you all are familiar with this, it was a class that was put on for by the Center for Nonprofit Management. It's called Blueprint for Leadership. And it was a training course to get minorities active in the nonprofit arena. And it was started by the late Dr. Wright Lassiter. Used to be the chancellor for DCCD, also a big proponent for the Center for Nonprofit Management. But he started this program to get minorities invested and engaged into the nonprofit arena. And actually it was board training. And once you graduated from the program, they actually put you on a board, within the Metroplex. I work with the Youth Village. It's called Youth Village of Dallas. I worked with them for a while. And one of the big offsprings or offshoots of that, and what you hear all the time, is Cafe Momentum.
Absolutely.
That guy, Chad Hauser, was on the board with me over at the Youth Village, and he took Cafe Momentum and just ran with it. But, we were working with young guys that were incarcerated for minor offenses and things like that. So, coming from the police department and working on the police department, I could see that, those things started early in people's lives, getting in trouble. So that's how I got hooked up with that, and then I went to another nonprofit called Open Doors Foundation, and that was started by another guy. And actually, he was the manager, manager for Emmett Smith, and he started that foundation. It's called Open Doors Foundation, working with the underserved community. I worked with him for a couple of years, and then I became the president of the Black Police Association, and we have an outreach of nonprofits, and that's how I actually met Greg back when we get the coffee with cops, and y'all had a program down there, and that's how I met and got involved with the Volvo alcohol. And like I tell people all the time, and I've been blessed. I live a nice life, and it's not of my own doing, and I've been blessed, and I have to pay this back and pay it forward, and to help people that live, and that people that are in need of help. And I always tell people, the people that we can make the greatest impact on is young people. And it seems like it has to get younger and younger, but I want to do my part. And Muhammad Ali, I don't know if you ever saw this movie, and Muhammad Ali was in this movie, and he was going around passing out Bibles. Champ, this is a champ making all this money. And some guy, he picked up a guy, and the guy said, "Look, I'll do it for you." And he goes, Muhammad Ali, no, I got to do this because I'm trying to get to heaven. He says, I want to do the work myself. And so we all are, obligated. And I know some people say good, your good deeds will not get you into heaven, but that won't keep me out. I guarantee you.
Go ahead, Sammy.
I was going to say, there's one part that I want to pick up on a little bit, because I think it's going to tie into the next kind of lump of questions that we've been talking about. But throughout your origin story, you talked about the hard work, you talked about the education. So we can touch a little bit more about the education side. But what was it about becoming a police officer? Like, did you have an aspiration? Was it something that was a calling? Like, how did you jump into that line of duty there when it's, we'll get into this a little bit later too, but when it seems to be like a tumultuous at times type of profession?
Well, it's kind of funny that you asked that, because when I was in college and when I was graduating, I had no idea in my mind of being a police officer. Never thought about it. But I'm gonna tell you what happened when I graduated. The Army had sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas. I had got my commission down there. I got pinned. My father actually flew down. He was on active duty, flew down and actually pinned my bar on me when I got commissioned at Fort Riley, Kansas. So I went back to Alabama. I was sitting there and waiting to see if the military was going to give me active duty. And I don't know if you know about ROTC. There's a small percentage of people that come from the colleges that go to active duty. The majority of the people that are on active duty as officers come from the military academies, West Point and all those places. So they give a larger portion goes to West Point, smaller portion goes, and you think about all the colleges all over the United States that have ROTC programs, it's very hard to get active duty. So I was hoping and praying to get active duty because I didn't have anything else to do. And so I was sitting home in the summer. I was sitting at my grandparents' house, not doing anything, and one of my friends, my fraternity brothers that I went to college with at Alabama, at South Alabama, called me and said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I go, "Nothing." And he said, "Why don't you come out here?" He was on the police department. He had been a police officer about 3 years in Dallas. He says, "Why don't you come out here, man, and get on the police department?" I go, "Man, I don't think I'll be no police." He goes, "Look, man, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." And he said, "Well, why don't you come out here?" He says, "You can stay with me and my wife and till you get on your feet and we'll take care of you." And so I got on a plane and did all my testing and everything, and they accepted me. And I never forget the first day I came to Dallas in 1987. I don't know if you all remember, but it was the hottest it had ever been in Texas. And I stepped off the plane. I was so excited about getting to Dallas, and I go, I'm gonna, get it. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go see this. Gonna see this. And I could actually see the heat vibrations when I stepped off the plane. It was so hot, and I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go in and do anything. But I went through the testing, and I got accepted. I was in 1987, class 204. I'll never forget it. And it was about 45 people in my class. And that's how I became a police officer. And then when I did that, I go, I'm only going to do this for 5 years, and then I'm going to do something else. 5 years turned into 10, 10 turned into 20, and it finally hit 30 years and 8 months. I finally retired. So that's how I became a police officer. Never had a inkling about becoming a police officer. Never.
Wow.
So, or go ahead, Sammy.
No, go ahead. I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about 30 years as a police officer, and I just find it so fascinating that, if it wasn't for that friend that invited you to come down, how your life could have been totally different. And It just makes me to think again how important relationships are in our lives, and how relationships are so critical to, our processes throughout our lives. As your journey through, your 30 years in the police department, talk a little bit about some of the relationships that maybe mentored you from when you started all the way up until when you were leading detectives in that homicide division that you were in.
Okay. And like I said, I remember I remember my days in the police academy, and it was kind of funny that, I guess these people are taught to, not necessarily act mean, but, they really weren't very nice to you. And one of the ladies at the academy, and she was tough. very tough lady. I'll say her name, Gloria Spencer. And she was so tough, and she would look at you and just like, burn through you. And she was very, just very about the business of policing. Then there's another guy named Hiram Burleson, who was also an instructor. Very articulate man, very in charge, just knew a lot about policing. And it was kind of funny that when they were my instructors in the academy. And then once I did my time on the streets, I think I did about maybe 10 years. I graduated in 87. And 1996, I was an instructor at the academy, working with these two people that were mean to me, and I found out it was all a facade. They were the nicest people, and it come to find out, me and Gloria go to the same church, and we're just we see each other at church all the time, and she's a totally different person. She's retired. She actually did 36 years on the police department before she retired. But those were some of the people that made the greatest impact on me, as those initial trainers that I saw. And then I had a lot of dealings with her and another guy that was very articulate and was the president of the union. Actually was one of the guys that started the Black Police Association. It was initially the Texas Peace Officer Association. It was Preston Gilstrap. And Preston was just a very intelligent, articulate man. And I'll never forget, we were at a meeting and we were doing something, and Preston started his organization. And I just got out of grad school, and I got my graduate degree in business. And we were talking about something, and Preston started talking. This guy, he went to college, didn't graduate, and he started talking about something. And I forget the term that he used, but that term is it's not a colloquialism that everybody uses. I mean, you had Sarbanes-Oxley, that's what it was. He started talking about Sarbanes-Oxley, and I go, what you know about that? I said, I just got out of grad school, I should know about this, and I'm talking, but this guy is that smart. And we had Sarbanes-Oxley, that's not a term.
What is that?
I don't know either.
Well, I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Well, if y'all remember when Enron had the fall down, and when Enron, the guy in Enron had invested a lot of people's stock into the company itself, into Enron. And that's when Enron went down, all these people lost their 401ks and stuff like that. But Sarbanes-Oxley was two senators or congressmen that wrote up a law and a rule about, it's all something about almost like insider trading. But one guy name was Oxley, and but it's Sarbanes-Oxley. But this guy shouldn't have been talking about it, because I was just shocked that he knew something about it. And just to show you how smart he is, we had got involved in some litigation and the police association, and Preston had written a brief, and we gave it to the attorneys, and a big firm. It wasn't Goodwin and Ron Keogh. It's Ron Keogh and another guy. He actually ran for mayor, but it's a big firm that he ran. And he asked me, he goes, why did y'all go hire another lawyer? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, this document. It had to be an attorney that wrote this up. I go, no, Preston did that. The guy is that sharp.
Wow.
I mean, he's a journeyman, but he was one of the guys that made a very impact. Actually, he was the president. He started the police union. And then he groomed me, and I actually ran the police union. For 6 years, I was the president of the police association, and helped me a lot. Made a great impact on me, and like I said, a lot of police officers. And like I said, my friend, the guy that called me to come to Dallas, John Childs, and John, we are all fraternity brothers. His brother is also a Dallas police officer, and so we all went to college. His brother was my platoon sergeant at the when I was in college at ROTC. So we're very close. We all, we live pretty close together now. But John retired about 2 years ago, and we're very close. Still see each other. We just had his mother's 87th birthday just 2 weeks ago. But there are a lot of people that made a lot of impact. I actually met my wife by being a police officer, and I'll tell you a short story.
Yes.
One of my good friends named we were all, police are greedy. I don't know if you know it, but we're greedy. When it comes to these moonlighting jobs, so I was working. I had a friend of mine turn me onto this job, and he said he was coordinating the job. He says, "Hey man, I got a job that you can coordinate. And if you coordinate, you can make more money because you're doing more stuff." So he gave me this job, and my wife was working at this company, and they wanted police officers. So I went down there. I started working there for a couple of months, and I saw this girl up in the office, and she was sharp. I mean, and one thing that really caught my attention, I told the story the other day. One thing that really caught my attention is that I worked there probably 3 or 4 days a week, and I never saw this lady with the same clothes on twice. She had, I mean, just immaculate dresser, spiffy business suits, high heels, and just immaculate every day. I never saw her with the same clothes on, never. And then I married her, and she has every closet in this house. And I know, now I understand why she never wears the same thing, because she has every closet in the house that we have now. And she still wears different clothes every day, and she never wears the same thing twice. I met my wife as a police officer, and I never forget the things that just our first date was at the La Madeleine at the Galleria.
Okay.
And then our second date was at the mine. You remember the mine right there off of Stemmons and Oak Lawn? They used to be up there on top of the hill.
So I know the hill you're talking about. I've heard of the place, but I've never been to that. I think that was already shut down by the time I got up here.
Yeah, it was called the Mine. We ate there. My memory is impeccable. I had beer battered shrimp that night.
Wow.
And so that was my when I met my wife by being a police officer. We've been married 26 years now. And like I said, the police department has been, as they say, very, very good to me.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I met a lot of friends.
That I love that, because I want to transition a little bit into your work as a police officer and then moving into detective.
Okay.
And the reason why I want to do that is because something you just mentioned that right there was the ability to remember, your sharp mind. I think your upbringing, your educational background, your understanding of learning, I think played a lot probably into that, just from what I'm picking up in this conversation. So we'd love to just explore being a detective with you, because there's so much that's portrayed on TV, but we'd love to just kind of dig into that line of profession just a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I left the police academy in 1996, and I went to I just wanted to get a change, do something different. No, 96 to 2005. I worked at the police academy from 1996 to 2005. 2005, I interviewed to be a detective in the robbery unit, and I worked downtown. And actually, the robbery units are investigating units used to be at each station, but then they said they wanted to centralize it because if you had like a serial robber, if they were robbing over here in Oak Cliff, and so they brought everything downtown. So I stayed downtown and as a robbery detective, and I got trained by a guy, and it was just ironic. Man, the Lord just works in mysterious ways. The guy that trained me, name was Willie Braggs, and guess where he was from? Mobile, Alabama. That's right. And so we bonded. Man, this guy, he was a hell of a trainer, and he knew how to. Man, I saw him work people and just get. His biggest thing was getting confessions, and he would just do things and not screaming and hollering, shouting, and he would just I'll never forget one time we had this guy. He's going around we call it hitting licks. That's what they call robbing people or robbing business. He was hitting licks, and we got him some kind of way. And Willie sat there, and I was in there in another room looking at him interview this guy, and the guy was talking, and he made some type of emotional connection with this guy about family. And the guy was sitting here, and you can't see my hands, but the guy put his hands on the desk, and Willie grabbed his hand. And, he grabbed his hand and started touching it. And he looked at him in the face, and he goes, "You're not this kind of guy. Your parents didn't raise you like that." And I saw a tear rolling down the guy's eye. The next thing you know, I robbed this place. I did this and this. And the guy was just, I mean, I was just taken aback by how smooth he was just to talk somebody into a confession. Because he has that human touch. You know, it's kind of unheard of for a man to touch another man. And he grabbed his hand and he says, look, I know your parents didn't raise you like this. And Willie was smooth, man. And he trained me. I worked with him a lot, had a great time with him. And I'll tell you about my first robbery is, I'll never forget. It was, there's a park right there off of East Grand, went right past the fire station. There's a park down there. And this young couple, Hispanic couple, were down there, and they were. It was in the daytime. It wasn't dark, and they were sitting out on top of the car, kissing and stuff. Guy comes by there, pulls a gun out, and pulls a gun on them, and makes them give them their money. And so he actually pulled them out of the car, and they didn't speak English that good, and so the guy said, got him out of the car and said, "Sit right here," and he smacked his hand twice on the car. And so, they couldn't give me a description. People looking at the barrel of a gun, not going to give you a good description.
Right.
But they told me that he put his hand on that car. So I called PS, which is physical evidence section. They came down, dusted the car, got his fingerprints on the car immediately.
Wow.
This is my first caller. I went into the computer. After they gave me the match with the fingerprints, found the guy, made a lineup, said, show me, I showed him, I gave him a five person line, six people line up, said, hey, pick the guy out. Said, right there is him. Then I went and got his name. He'd been pawning stuff at the pawn shop, got his address, hunt him down, man. That was my first caller as a detective. And I always remember because he said, sit right here. He made him get out of the car and he smacked the car. So if it wasn't for dumb crooks, we wouldn't catch him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So you mentioned earlier about how in terms of homicides, this cell phone is one of the greatest tools now. Yes. In terms of your work in the robbery division, what were some of the initial things when you would come onto a scene that you would, obviously you're talking to, the victim and you're trying to analyze what's going on, but what are the things you're looking for? What are the things you're asking to try to be able to figure out where you go in terms of your direction?
First thing for robberies of a business, we're looking for videos. And you'd be surprised how many people have video cameras that are faking it. They got the cameras not hooked up to nothing. And so a lot of businesses, that's one of the things that we look for in business. Video cameras, if not cameras within the business itself, but exterior cameras. Another business might have a camera. So that was one of the big things that we look for business robberies and for witnesses. And, a lot of times, we'd see people that would, that would be around and say, oh, yeah, I saw the guy that left. I saw what kind of car he got in. So looking for video evidence and looking for witnesses is the biggest thing that we could utilize to actually catch people. And, we show lineups, but I don't know if you remember, but really the department had gotten away I don't know if you remember with the Innocent Project when we found out how many people had been put in jail falsely by, so we kind of
from lineups.
Yeah, from bad lineups. So now it's a combination of everything. We need physical evidence and a lineup and a confession and a witness. So we just don't solely rely on witness or a person picking a person out of a lineup. And so, because a lot of people were falsely incarcerated behind bad lineups. And so one of the things that we always try to do is we talk to everybody at the scene and we do a canvassing at the scene, but the business robberies to me were a little bit easier because if you think about it, these people really don't plan these things out, very on TV, they have a meeting, they plan them out, but most guys, when they, a lot of robberies are crimes of opportunity, and so very seldom do you have a robber that will plan something out. And so without planning, they're going to make mistakes. Some guy won't put a glove on, they go open the front door. And, most time these people that commit these crimes, this ain't their first time at the park, so they've been incarcerated before. We got their fingerprints. And so that physical evidence helps a lot. Physical evidence is a big deal with fingerprints, DNA, and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that we look for as a detective. And like I said, always looking for witnesses to get somebody, to tell something.
When I was in college, my townhome was robbed. And when the detective was there, it was interesting because two things that he did that I just blew me away was one, he went through the cushions of our couch. He said, you would be surprised how many times we found a wallet from someone sitting down and it falling out. The next thing he did, he went into our refrigerator and did fingerprints on some of the items that were in the refrigerator. He said, you'd be surprised how often they'll grab something and take a drink and put it back in.
Oh, yeah. People, and I've seen people eat at people's houses and just, you know, do all the kind of stuff, you know. And so, but you work in the business robberies and, you know, I did business robberies and individual robberies. And so one thing about the individual robberies, you know, a lot of people, when they're looking down the barrel of a gun, they're not paying too much attention to, they can tell you how many grooves are in the barrel, but they're not going to tell you what the person looked like that was holding the gun. And so I really liked the business robberies. And so that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most. And robbery, you know, doing investigations, and man, and, you know, we were a little bit, I'll tell you, like all the guys in our unit, man, you know, I consider myself a spiffy dresser. And so that was another thing, you know, if you're working in investigations, you got to be sharp, man.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, nice clothes. And it's kind of funny. We'd come to work and we have guys that they open up your lapel jacket to see who made it. You know, like, oh, is that Dolce & Gabbana? Or, you know, so, hey, man, I like, you know, it's not like the TV shows with the guy with the with the old tweed jacket and the shoulder pads on it. You know, we were very conscious about our wear, you know, and starched shirts and, you know, very nice clothing. It was, you know, we had some detectives that didn't care that much about it, and but some of them, you know, very conscious about the way they look.
That's interesting. So why is that? Like, why is that such a culture? Because you see that in the TV shows as well, like sharp dresser for the most part, right?
Yeah, and I think TV has something to do with it, but you know, it gives an air of competence not only to you but to the people that you're dealing with when they see when you don't look like when you don't look like a dirtbag, you know, when when somebody's come there dressed, sharp tie, color coordinated, it gives you a little confidence, and it makes the person that you're dealing with think, hey, this guy might know something. He might do this job pretty good.
That's an excellent thing and something that I hadn't really thought about. But yeah, if you have somebody that just kind of shows up, you know, dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, says, hey, I want to help solve your case. You might be looking for someone else with a jacket on at least, right?
Yeah. When we would, I mean, people were very conscious, and I never forget, man. I actually, my last couple of years, and people would always tease me because I actually had a lady that would come to my office and, you know, measure me for my shirt. I had my shirts custom made, and so. And I actually turned her on to a couple of detectives, and people go, what's this lady? She's not a police officer, but she come up there and fit everybody for their shirts and everything. Cause I got my arms are pretty long, so I don't buy off the rack, you know. So, you know, you get to actually pick out your material. You got to pick out what kind of collar you want. And, you know, I was really I had always wear, you know, cufflinks and stuff, but we were really, man, we had a couple of detectives that were using my lady, and she was really good, man. She made a lot of money off of us too, you know.
Cletus, it sounds like that's your wife rubbing off on you, by the way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So I'm curious, what led to you moving from the robbery division to homicide?
Okay, well, actually, it wasn't a direct move. I was in robberies as what we call a senior corporal, 2-stripe. In order to be a detective, you have to have 2 stripes. And so, in 2005, they said that they were going to downsize. They were downsized in the robbery unit, and they said, you know, I was the last one up there, so you know what that means, last in, first out. And so they said, Judge, you're going to have to go back to patrol. And I said, well, if I'm going back to patrol, I'm going to be a sergeant. And so I had been on, I'd been on a while, never took the sergeant exam because I always had a good job. So, and a good job is concerned, you know, where you want to work if you're where you want to be, that's a good job. So I always had a good job. I was at the academy for a long time. And so I was at robbery detective. So they told me, he said, well, you're going to have to leave and you're going back to patrol. So I took the sergeant exam, passed it the first time. So when I went back to patrol, I was a sergeant, supervisor. So I went back to patrol from 2007 to 2012. And I stayed there. And 5 years in patrol. I was the president of the union back then. And so I went to 2012. There was an opening in capers, crimes against persons, a sergeant for the assault unit. So I went over to the assaults, worked over there for a couple of years as an assault sergeant, and then I went to homicide. And that's my last 5 years at homicide. And I mean, homicide is like the Mecca, that's the ultimate investigative unit. And, that's where you want to be. If you want, like I say, I think they almost stopped First 48 right when I got over there. But, and I'll tell you the reason why they stopped First 48 is because police detectives were turning into celebrities. And a lot of those guys on First 48 were known throughout the city. People knew them by name. And so the chief thought they were just getting a little bit too big for themselves. So he cut and one thing that First 48 did for us, though, it did increase our recruiting ability. Because when people saw First 48, and everybody goes, I want to work in Dallas. I want to be a homicide detective. So my last 5 years, I went to homicide as a sergeant, enjoyed it. And I know that sounds kind of morbid, but, and one of the things that we would always say, no one has the right to take someone else's life. No one has that right. I don't care what kind of person they are, what they were doing, unless it's self-defense. And so we, as a detective, and I was not a detective, I was a sergeant, but I supervised the detectives. But, we thought, or we think it's our duty to catch these people. And they think they're smarter than we are, and they think they're going to get away with it. But a lot of times, and one thing is, the last year that I was in homicide, Dallas had 168 murders. I think I responded to about half of those, probably 80 murders. And so, but one of the, I always tell people that, no one has the right to take someone else's life. And so but people, they don't publicize the fact that, they'll tell you that the murder rate was high in Dallas, but a lot of those murders are solved. I'm talking about 60 to 70% of the murders are solved in Dallas. They don't talk about that, And another thing is, I tell people all the time, murder is a crime of opportunity. There's no way that police officers can stop people from murdering folks. People do murders when they want to. And if the police was around, they wouldn't do it. So, it was kind of a bad metric to measure the effectiveness of a police chief by the murder rate. Because it's something that police can't control. If you remember the movie, what was it? Tom Cruise and when they were actually catching people before they do the crime.
Oh, Minority Report.
Yeah, that ain't real. Minority Report is not real. So there's no way that we can catch people before they do the murders. And so murder is a crime. Now, if we have a serial murder, then we can catch that guy. We can hunt him down, but the possibility of, a lot of the murders in Dallas are random murders. Are there murders of people that know each other? A lot of it involve the drug trade, things like that. So, one of the things I didn't like that they did to Chief Hall was, they used the metric of murder. The murder count has a bad mark on her, and really no police chief can control the murders in their city. Because if people want to murder someone, they do it. And they do it when it's good for them, when it's convenient for them. Not, if the police are around, they're not going to do it. But I'd like to tell you about one of the, the last murder that I worked, or that I was in conjunction with, was Kendra Hatcher. And she was a dentist that lived downtown in Dallas. And a young dentist that lived downtown, and very pretty, attractive young lady. And she got murdered. And it was like a murder for hire deal. Very involved. I guarantee you'll probably see a movie in a couple of years about it.
Cletus, was this the case where she was actually killed in a parking garage? Is that correct?
That is correct. She was actually came home. She was dating a guy that was a dermatologist. He was playing around with a dental hygienist. He was dating both of them. Now, the dental hygienist, he was helping her out financially, paying some bills for her. And he had told her, I guess he had finally decided that he was going to settle down with the dentist. And the dental hygienist was not ready to accept that. And she actually had her friend, a female friend, go and hire somebody to kill her.
Mm.
And it was just ridiculous. And so I never forgot. I was down there at that day at the hotel, not the hotel, but at the apartment complex and in the parking garage. And the way we caught the initial lady was that we kept watching the video of cars, all the cars that were going out right after the murder. And it was that we got a license plate of a Jeep, and the Jeep was actually owned by a guy that we put the Jeep on TV and has a newscast and said, anybody know anything about this Jeep? The guy that owned the Jeep said, hey, that's my Jeep, but I didn't have the car. And he said, well, you need to come down here. So we brought him down there. He came down and said, look, I own a automobile repair shop. I had somebody come in. I'm fixing on their car. I let them have this particular Jeep and let them use it, while I was working on the car. So he told us who he gave it to. So we pulled that girl down there. We went and got her, pulled her down to the office, and she would initially, she was tough. She wouldn't give up anything for a while. And then we started reminding her that she's got a young kid, and if she, it depends on how she works this case, whether she'll get to see this kid ever in her life or never. And so when we reminded her of that, she accepted and she took responsibility. And then she told us, hey, I hired this guy. She told us the guy that she hired, went and tracked him down. He admitted, yeah, she gave me some money and some dope to kill this lady.
Wow.
And then they all turned on the lady, the dental hygienist. And I mean, they told us that, hey, we didn't do this on our own. We were told by this lady that she's the one that paid us to do this. So she had ran to Mexico, and I think there was a $50,000 reward out for her. We hadn't seen her in about 3 or 4 weeks. And finally someone from Mexico called us and said, she's down here. And so one of the things that in Mexico, if they extradite somebody back to the United States, they cannot get the death penalty. We can only incarcerate them for life. That's an agreement that we have with Mexico, or that Mexico has with us. And so we extradited back her. She's in prison for the rest of her life. And the guy that killed her, I'm not sure what the other lady got, but that was the last murder that I worked. And one of the things I tell you, it was just not funny, but that I went to both of these ladies' houses. I went to the dental hygienist's house and to the dentist's house, and they were totally polar opposite people. I mean, not alike. The dentist was very health conscious, had a lot of vitamins. When we go in people's houses, we go through everything, and just closet very neat, very nice. She had all these different kind of waters in her refrigerator. I'll never forget that. A lot of vitamins and water all over the counter, and just very neat and nice. And then I went to the other lady's house, and just nasty. And I total polar opposites. And I just didn't see what this guy, this dermatologist, what he saw in this other lady. But that was like, and he was real callous. When only thing he kind of asked us about, he wanted to know when could he get his passport, because his passport was at the dentist's house. And, but she was a very nice lady. She did a lot of dental work for pro bono for underserved communities too. So
I remember that case. Yeah. It was quite publicized, quite a bit.
It actually made 2020, and not too long ago, the Eric Barnes is the lead detective on that case. Very sharp young man, very sharp. He did a good job on that case, and I guarantee, I not guarantee, but I foresee a movie about her in a couple of years.
Yeah, and Cletus said that case rang really close to me, because it actually occurred less than 3 blocks away from where I live.
Where you live now?
Yeah, where I live now. Yeah, so I was down here when that happened, and so that was a case that just rattled this section of downtown. How do you, as someone that worked in that department, and like you said, you've been a part of so many of those murders, from a mindset standpoint, how do you turn that off? and how do you decompress and just not let some of the things that you see and the cases that you experience just overwhelm you?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things I tell people all the time, and it might sound a little callous, but a lot of the murders that we go to, that I went to, like, nobody has a right to take someone's life, but some of these people were involved in dealings or business that resulted in death as a byproduct. Like I said, you know, if you want to be a window washer of skyscrapers or tall buildings, you know there's a possibility that you may fall.
You might fall, right?
Yeah. So if you want to be a drug dealer, if you want to be a robber, if you want to, you know, be involved in things that are callous and that may lead to death, I'm not saying that it's right, but I'm saying so it kind of takes the sting for me out of it. But like I said, now when innocent folks get killed, and like, you know, Kendra Hatcher, and like we had this one murder. Well, it was a murder, but we had a guy that came home over in Oak Cliff, came home and went in the house, and I think someone called him or told him that his light was on inside his car. He went outside, and some people about 2 or 3 streets over were shooting a gun in the air, and a bullet came down and hit him and killed him.
Wow.
So, you know, that's kind of gut wrenching. That's kind of heart wrenching. And not trying to be callous, but, you know, those are far and few between. But a lot of times you know, drug trade in Dallas is pretty big. And a lot of times, you know, people are involved in that particular, you know, death is a byproduct of being, you know, and people that are robbing folks and things like that, people robbing drug houses. But one of the things is I try to, you know, one of the things is that calms my mind and that soothes my mind is the fact that we catch the person that did it, regardless of who the victim was. And we put all the energy. And like, I don't know if you know, but like that first 48, when you say the first 48 is the most crucial time, because we get on things quick. And we get them, like, if I get a murder call when I was working, if I get a call at 1 o'clock at night and respond to a murder scene, I might not go back home until 3 o'clock the next day, 3 p.m. So we're on it for, you know, 15, 16 hours straight. But the first 48 hours is the most crucial. And so, you know, but one of the things, like I say, you know, I don't know what I did with it, but it was we had a mantra that we used to read. I don't know what I did with it. I thought I had it, but it was you know, and one of the saying that no one has a right to take someone else's life, and we're going to make it our business and to catch this person. And we'll turn over every stone, uncover every stone till we find the person that took someone. Because every time when you think about someone's death, that's somebody's child, that's somebody's loved one. So, you know, they didn't leave on their own accord. You know, someone took their life. And so that's one of the things about, you know, working in homicide. And I just say, you know, once you start going to them, you know, like say, now children, the death of a child really disturbs me. You know, anytime I saw a child that was killed or, you know, that really disturbs me. And suicides. You know, one thing about in the city of Dallas, we respond to all deaths, not just murders, but you know, natural deaths, suicides. And so we have to determine that what it is what it is, you know.
Right.
So just if someone dies, we have to make sure that it's not, you know, foul play. And another one of the final cases that I worked on was that Billy Shamir. I don't know if you remember the guy that was dressed, he acted like a healthcare worker, and he was actually killing a lot of older people in the city of Dallas.
Yes. Okay. I didn't know my name, but I remember the story.
Yeah.
He, you know, we don't know how many people he killed, because he did some in Collin County, some in Dallas, and he was in a lot of he's posing as a caretaker for older people. And one of the things, I'm not trying to indict folks, but, you know, a lot of these people were old and their loved ones weren't checking on them. You know, they left it up to this guy, and you know, and the night that we got onto him, that I responded to a call, went to a call up in Fort North Dallas, and somebody found the lady's keys were gone to her car, and you know, and I never forget, her husband, the lady's husband, was dead, but he was I guess he'd been in the Air Force or something, but they had a lot of models airplanes all over the house were hanging from the ceiling. I mean, the ceiling was just full of these airplane models. Very nice house up in far North Dallas, but that was Billy Shamir, and you know, he's in prison for life right now, but they don't know how many people, because a lot of these people were older citizens, and they a lot of them, some of them had ailments and health issues, and so some of them were dead, you know, have been dead and buried. So nobody's doing any exhumations, or we just don't know how many people this guy killed. But he was he was a serious murder. He was a serious murder.
You know, Cletus, just even based on just the short conversation we've had, it's evidently clear that law enforcement is a tough job, and the men and women that are involved in law enforcement have a difficult challenge every single day, and you never know what you're actually going to be getting into, whether you're patrolling the streets as a traffic cop or you're working in the homicide division. Now, the last several years in our media, it's become evident that there's been a major rift in terms of the general public and the police department. And, you know, one of the highlights from 2021 in terms of our news media was the coverage of what happened with George Floyd. And I'm curious to ask you, when that happened, you know, what was your observations and what was your take on that? And then I think Sam and I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the challenges that police have with different communities here in our country, and what are some of the things that we can do to make it better?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I was really struck by that, and just really, I just couldn't believe that the officer didn't or was not conscious of what he was doing. And not only Chauvin, but these other officers that were working with him, because, you know, someone should have said, hey, even, you know, if speaking to him wouldn't make him stop, I would have physically pulled him off of this guy. And you just can't, I mean, you know, I don't know where he was mentally to not think that, you know, and I've heard people all the time say, I can't breathe, or, you know, but, you know, we have to release those people. We have to, like, you know, even if they are lying, if they don't mean it. But I just don't understand how, you know, these other officers could stand around and not do anything, not try to remove him, not trying to get him off him. But one thing I tell the people right now where I'm working at, and I said, you know, this is my thought, that, you know, police academies are the gatekeepers for police officers. And I just don't think that, I think that, you know, this is not the first time that Chauvin had done something. And I really think that he probably did something in the academy, but people kind of blew it off, and people kind of excused him. And that's what I was told, you know, when you see something like that, or you see some type of idiosyncrasy in a police officer, because, you know, this profession is not like any other profession. And we, the police officers, are given the ability to take people's liberty, to physically harm people. And that's not, no other profession gives people that right to do that. So we can't have idiots. We can't have fools doing this job. And when we see people, and like one thing I said, you know, when they see people that have we have in Dallas this early warning system, when you start seeing an officer getting a lot of excessive use of force and things like that. But I think, you know, if it's excessive force to the point that they haven't hurt anybody, then we can do some counseling. But when they start hurting people, and when it gets to be excessive, they need to be let go. And another thing is, they shouldn't be able to go get a job somewhere else. You know? And I just was shocked by the fact that Chauvin was able to do this with 3 more officers standing there. And the guy was hollering and saying, I can't breathe. And they just sat there. And so I'm really shocked about that. And one of the things that that whole incident does is, a lot of people don't have trust in police anyway. So now you've given people the right to think that their presumptions and their thoughts about police are correct. And I guarantee you there's a small percentage of police that are bad, but there are a lot more police officers that are good. And there are far more than good than are bad. But there are, you know, I'm willing to admit that some people not necessarily don't respect the lives of other people, and not just black people, but some people just mean. And some people, you know, and so, but we need to get rid of those officers. We need to prevent them from getting any type of job in law enforcement at all. And when we see that officer that has that problem, they need to get rid of them. And one thing I see now is that police departments are doing that because, number one, the punitive damages can really hurt you. You know, when people are suing these cities and people are getting paid, and then, like I said, you know, as a police chief, if you want to, you know, if someone kills somebody under your watch, you ain't getting another job. Mm-hmm. You know, it's going to be hard for you to be transferred and something like that. So people now are taking accountability for their officers and their actions. And I think it's long overdue, but I think you're going to see a difference in policing. I think you're going to see, and one of the things I was on a podcast a couple of months ago, and this lady, you know, these people talking about defunding the police.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of funny. This lady made me really mad because the people that you hear that from are the ones that live in gated communities and live in, you know, when you never have to call the police, it's okay to defund them.
Right.
You know, but these people live in gated communities in neighborhoods and zip codes that they never phone the police. So it wouldn't make a difference to them. But I guarantee you, people that live in hard, tough neighborhoods, they're not for defunding the police. They want more police, and they want, you know, so that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. Because, you know, you might can defund the police in Highland Park. When the last time they had a murder up there. But I get, you know, so that's the craziest term that when people talk about defunding the police. Now, one of the things that they can do is like, and people think, you know, there's a lot of training on far as, you know, sensitivity, cultural sensitivity and things like that. That's not new. And it goes on. But one of the things is that this, you know, we might can, because a lot of times these people practice this bias that they don't realize they're practicing. And, you know, there's a lot of biases that people have, they don't realize. And when you let your biases, you know, control your conduct, then that's a problem. But, you know, we could do more bias training and things like that with police departments. And, you know, but a lot of times, you know, most people want the police in their neighborhoods. Most people want the protection of the police for their property and for their own well-being. But a lot of times, like say, you know, people get bad taste in their mouth when police officers do bad things. And one of the things that I just can't understand now with the proliferation of people with cameras and with their cell phones, how can an officer just continue to do stupid stuff? When everybody's got a phone, when there's cameras all over the place and people still do stupid stuff.
Cletus, a few minutes ago, you mentioned that like you thought that there were going to be a few things that police would be doing differently. What are some of those things? Does that go into some of the training or some of the ongoing things, or what are some of those things that you see perhaps coming in the future?
Yeah, well, one of the things is this bias training, police police legitimacy, and when people, and one thing, you know, we have to educate the public, and also when people think that what police do is legitimate, you know, and one of the things we should tell people, you know, if I ask you, say, hey man, let me see what's in your hand, but you know, if I tell you, hey, we just got a call out here, and there's a guy that fits your description, I need to, you know. When I explain it to you and legitimize my reason for talking to you, you're a little bit more apt to comply with what I'm asking. And so that's one of the things that we're asking police, because, you know, in days of old, a lot of police officers did what they did because they were police. And they think, hey, I'm the police, I can tell you what to do, and you got to do it. But we have to legitimize every interaction with citizens. We have to let people know I'm not just, and I use the term, jacking with you. I'm here because I got a call. I'm here because there was a call in this neighborhood and you fit the description, or your car looks like the car that was given the description. And when police articulate that to citizens, then they feel a little bit more legitimized in their dealings with police officers. And that's a big thing right now. Procedural justice and police legitimacy, those are two of the new terms that they're utilizing in a lot of police agencies, and it's some training that goes on with that. And you know, another big thing that you've heard about is de-escalation. is, not going to the extreme initially. And one of the problems with that, not a problem with it, but people need to understand here in the city of Dallas and in a lot of cities, there's a huge population of people that are suffering from mental disease. And it's hard to deal with people that are in crisis. And you got to have some special kind of skills to deal with that. And so those are some issues that police can't solve. And so, with the homelessness and people out there, and you all know, dealing with vulgar alcohol, the amount of people that are homeless a lot of those people are suffering from mental illness.
Yeah.
A large percentage of those people. And so some of those things that they're asking police officers to do, more training, and some police departments are even having these mental health units to respond to calls with the police.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I had heard, and we discussed this a little bit in getting ready for this conversation with you. You hear so much about the amount of training that, like let's say, like in the military, like a special forces training goes into, right? They train, they practice, they get ready for a specific mission, right? Then they go out there and then they take on that mission head first, and then they accomplish their goals, right? Whatever those may be. Greg brought up this point last night when we were talking about this, was that, police, they have to train for every mission all the time, no matter what, right? So that's, anytime that they're on duty or even off duty, right? They have to go, they're encountering a different scenario with a multitude of variables. So how do you think that somebody can necessarily prepare better than what they have now, if that's one of the answers, right? In the training, what else can they possibly do when it seems like it's an insurmountable task to even to begin to even start?
Well, I think the first thing that, police departments are doing are keying in on the type of calls that they seem to be responding to the most, and keying in on the calls that are causing us the most problems. And when you look at it, the domestic disturbance is one of the calls that, problems that cause us a lot of problems. And the other is people dealing with people with mental issues. And those are the calls. And every time, not every time, but a majority of the time, when you look at some of these calls, and when someone gets shot, then they'll tell you, oh, this person was in crisis, and the police officers didn't know, use the de-escalation techniques. But one of the things that we teaching people to do is distance is your friend. The more distance between you and the suspect, especially someone suffering from mental illness, the better it's for the police officer, because then you have time to react. But let's say if I come into contact with the suspect or with the person in a mental crisis, and I run up on that person and try to take control of them quickly, then they pull out a gun or a knife and I got to shoot them. But if I had to stay my distance from that person, try to talk them down, give them, there's a lot of training on this de-escalation, and it's deep. It ain't, it won't be accomplished in a day, but to get police officers to learn, first of all, you got to build a rapport with the person. Then you have to get that person to believe and to think that you're genuinely there and care about their well-being. That takes some time. And so, we have to get people to respond to calls like that. And so the biggest thing is that to give people distance and not, rush in. Because I'll tell people all the time, and especially when people call, when the mother calls the police on her son that's in crisis. Now, if you can't control him and he's your loved one, he's your son, and you brought him into the world, what do you think's going to happen when a total stranger shows up? And I understand, but people ask police to do a lot. And I had, and some people, said that I was at a town hall meeting it's been a couple of months ago, and an attorney was there. And he goes, well, you all are trained for that. No, we're not trained for that, and there is some training going on, but, the level of training that people go to school for years to become psychologists and therapists. There's not enough time to make a police a therapist, and so, let's be real. And I tell people all the time, and I hate to say this, but you need to be not reluctant, but you need to be real cautious about calling the police to deal with someone in crisis, because it's going to be hard for them to get, if they love one and you can't control them.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to, and you look at the statistics, it hasn't been well for police dealing with people in crisis. And we're taking these de-escalation classes and stuff like that, but it's a time-consuming process, not only for the training, but also when you're there on the scene to gain control of somebody.
Cletus, one of the things that Sammy and I talk about in our book that we wrote, and we talk about it as an underlining theme in this Pursuit of Growth show, is mental health in our culture and our world is a major challenge just across the board. And, there's studies that you can read that there are more mental health issues in our society than any time in recorded history. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the severe case of these, we're asking law enforcement to basically go into these situations that we've allowed in terms of our culture to take place. And we're almost asking them to come and fix a solution. And we're putting law enforcement in very, very difficult circumstances, to your point, that, man, it's gotten so bad that it's the root issue isn't being addressed. We're asking law enforcement to come in and try to solve the symptoms, but we're not getting down to the root issue. And I know that's a big statement, but man, it's just, in terms of police, how do you guys feel like? Do you just feel like you're overwhelmed? Do you feel like, what's the rationale? What's the mindset of the general officer and the law enforcement being put up against this obstacle?
Well, a lot of police do feel overwhelmed, and like Chief Brown said this before he left. People are asking police to do a lot more. They're asking us to be social workers. They're asking us to be therapists, financial consultants. They're asking us to be divorce lawyers, and police have a big role to do, and they're being asked to be a lot. So the more you ask people to do, when you think and conclude that there is going to be some issues, there are going to be some shortcomings with that. And police officers do feel overwhelmed. They do feel that, we're being asked to do a lot. And like I say, we need some help from the government to take over some of these things. Like I say, we don't have insane asylums anymore. And there's a taboo on anybody saying anything about mental health. So nobody seeks help anymore. And then, like I said, by the time somebody realizes that they need help, they're so far off that, and like I said, the homelessness problem is just the extension of the mental illness. Because I tell people all the time, just imagine if you were homeless. I was in the Army. I could stay out in the woods in a couple of nights, but, a lot of people couldn't deal with that. And so I tell people all the time, if you're homeless, there's going to be there's some mental illness that goes with homeless. It's just
absolutely.
That's a part of that's par for that course, because people are outside. They don't have control of their lives. They don't, you can't go to the bathroom when you want. You can't take a shower. You can't clean up. You don't know when you're going to eat your next meal. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and police do feel overwhelmed. And like I said, they're asking for I think, people are, a lot of the, some of the organizations are trying to do more and trying to, get control over these things. But police, the things that are blatant, when the police, there's no sense for police shooting somebody running away from it. Mm-hmm. That don't make no sense. And, sometimes some of these things that are being caught on camera are just too far, and police need to take responsibility when we do things. And I tell people all the time, we all make mistakes. And when we do make mistakes, we need to own up to it. Mm-hmm. Don't lie about it. Don't try to cover it up, and just, suffer the consequences. Because one thing about it, when we get police officers doing bad things out here, it makes it bad for all police, because the only thing that person remembers is not that particular police. They remember that uniform. That's what mistreated me, and I'm not going to forgive them. So we ask officers all the time that, you need to be conscious, because the way you treat a person, you leave a bad taste in that person's mouth for the next police officer.
You speak a lot. Sorry to cut you off, but you speak a lot about the or it's spoken a lot right now in society about mental health, right? And self-care and self-love and you know, you get your mind right and all that kind of stuff. Take time for yourself. Has there been a lot of outreach to police officers or law enforcement with programs or services in which they're providing those types of services to help, you know, police officers, law enforcement, like understand that more? It seems like, you know, so much is like put on us, like so much help is there, and maybe because it's a business aspect, right? I can help you with your mental health, calm yourself down, whatever, you know, techniques. But I don't see a lot of attention that's being paid, and maybe just because I'm not in this profession. Are there services provided to the officers now more
Yes,
than there has been?
there are, but I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of police departments do offer services and do offer counseling for officers and for their families, but a lot of police officers won't participate because there's necessarily a taboo,
Yeah,
and
stigma, right?
they don't want people. You're correct. They don't want people to think that there's something wrong with them,
Right.
or they're not tough enough to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, they do tell you it's confidential, and you can set up an appointment. We have Dallas Police has a counseling services for the police officer and their family. But I would beg to, you know, say how many people actually participate in that, because there's a taboo attached to it. And like I said, one thing I noticed that you know, suicides are not that in Dallas. You know, we haven't had a lot of. I remember several suicides, but like lately in the last couple of years, I don't remember a lot of police officers committing suicide. But when I first got here, that was a big problem: suicide and divorce. But I don't see a lot of suicides right now with police officers, and like a lot of times, you know, and we always tell police officers when I was at the police academy, number one is police officers need an outlet other than, like, we always tell people, get friends that ain't police. You know, you need to hang around folks that ain't police, because when police get together, all we talk about is police stuff. So I have a lot of friends that aren't police officers, and like, you know, I got friends that are, you know, executives. Some of them are executives, some are lawyers, some, you know, guys, you know, hard hat workers and stuff. So I have a variety of friends, truck drivers and stuff like that. But we always tell people to seek friendship other than with police officers, and also to get involved in something besides working, like little league baseball coaching, you know, something to have another outlet to, you know, to kind of even yourself out. But a lot of times officers just, you know, they love the job and they get, you know, overwhelmed by the job. But suicides have gone down tremendously in the Dallas area for Dallas police.
Well, Cletus, this is kind of the fourth quarter of our show.
Okay.
And I've got to tell you this, man, I appreciate the stories that you've shared and the straightforward nature of this conversation has been really eye-opening to me. And man, I've loved everything about your transparency and your candor. But as we start kind of wrapping up towards the end of the show, Sammy and I have questions that we ask every guest that joins us on our podcast.
Sure.
And so the first one's kind of subjective in nature. And so it's really the first thing that comes to your mind. But, you know, what's one of maybe your favorite actionable tips? Maybe it's a method or a lesson learned from your life in terms of self-improvement and personal development. What's been something that's been really important to you?
Okay, one of the things I'll tell you, man, you got to have a tenacity. You got to have a don't quit attitude. And just, you know, I've always been driven by success. And like, and that's one of the things that just, you know, that I've not been around, but like I'll tell you one of the things, the biggest thing, and it's a pub for my fraternity, but Kappa Alpha Psi, I pledged the fraternity back in. And one thing I'll tell people all the time, and white guys don't understand this, but I'll tell people all the time. And I think me and you talked about this before. In the
I know you're gonna say.
In the black community, fraternities and sororities go way past college. You never get out. It's like the mafia, and, you know. and so when we pledge a fraternity in college, it's for life. And you know. And I've been active in my fraternity ever since I pledged in 1984, and in undergrad, and I've been in the alumni chapter ever since. Never been out. And so, but one of the big tenets in our fraternity is being successful and achievement. That's what we talk about, achievement. And that's the driver, that fraternity, being introduced to these fraternity people that I grew up with. I mean, some of the guys in my community, and I remember back in Stockton, Alabama, when I was a young boy, and several guys came home from college, and my fraternity, we're the one with the canes, twirling the canes, red and white, and they were twirling the canes, and I was just impressed and mesmerized by them. And I was like, man, those guys are sharp. They're going to college. And I'll tell you a story, and I'm kind of digressing, but I'll never forget. I was in college, and one of my roommates' friends was a Kappa. And we were sitting in the dorms. We didn't have anything to do. And you remember in your college days, you're always hungry. And so my college roommate's friend said, hey, my fraternity alumni chapter is having a picnic. Would you all like to go? And we like, free food and beer? And we go, yes, we're going. So we all got in the car and we drove out to this guy's house. And first black guy I ever seen with a Mercedes was the owner of the house. And he had a house. It was a spread. It was about 400 people at his house. Oh, wow. He had a big yard, a big backyard, and it was huge. And he had these big pavilions out there. And I never seen that many people at somebody's house. And so he said, my friend's cousin, his roommate, he said, guy said, hey man, I need you all to go and get some ice. And so we said, okay, we'll go get some ice. So we got in the car and we get ready to go. He goes, what are y'all doing? He says, we're getting ready to go get some ice. He goes, go in the house and get the ice, man. So we go in the guy's house, and there's these big refrigerators like in the cafeteria at school.
Yeah.
I mean, a whole.
He had his own ice machine.
Yeah, no, he had his whole wall of refrigerators, and those silver big hot. I mean, I was like, and I go, man, what does this guy do? He goes, he's a dentist. And I go, and he's a Kappa. I go, I'm gonna be a Kappa.
There you go.
So that was one of the biggest, and in our fraternity, man. I mean, that's a big thing. Being achievement, and not necessarily just achieving financial success, but also one of the other tenets is service in the community. That's another tenet in our fraternity, and that's what has governed me most of my life. I've been a member since 1984, and just seeing the Kappas and seeing what they do and how they are involved in the community, and just achievement in every field of human endeavor. In arts.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And so that's what that's one of the drivers for me, to be successful. And you can see back here all these plaques and all this Kappa stuff is, that's my fraternity, and I'm just proud to be a member,
That's
so
awesome.
that's what drives me.
The second question that we like to ask our guests is an interesting take on an old question. So you've probably heard the question in the past: if you could go back in time 10 years, what would you tell yourself? Right? That's not the question that we're asking. So what we've done is we said, if we could go forward 10 years from now, what would you tell yourself in 10 years? So imagine a time capsule, right? We're going to bury something, write a note in it, bury it. 10 years from now, we're going to open that up. What would that note to yourself say?
Mine would say probably you should have enjoyed yourself a little bit more. I probably should have, and still have time to do is, enjoy myself. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, but one of the things I've gotten into in the last couple of years is, and I know Greg, I can look at Greg and tell that he's into this, is being in mindfulness. I've really started to get into that because, a lot of times we're in situations where I always have to, sometimes you get bogged down in thinking what's wrong and what's not right, but we need to enjoy the moment and think what is right, what is, and so I try to stay in the moments and be more mindful of what I'm doing. And like I said, it really started in my golf game because I realized that I'm not the guy that can, excuse my language. I can't talk smack and play golf at the same time.
Yeah.
So I gotta concentrate on my game, and I have to be in the mindfulness of my golf game, and I have to be mindful, like, you know, I don't take my phone out there with me when I'm playing golf, and and I try to not only enjoy my golf game, but enjoy the friendship and the camaraderie of the people that I'm playing with. Regardless how bad I'm playing, regardless if I'm not making putts, I want to enjoy that moment. And so that's the last couple of years, man. And that's what I try to spend my time. And like even with my little grandson, when he's here at their house, I just want to be mindful. And then I try to teach him something, or just give him little words of wisdom. And when he's 8 years old, and he's a smart little kid, and he'll tell me, he says, we were in the car one day, and I said something to him, and he'll tell you, if you ask him, he says, sometime you're going to be, and you know what he'll say? Uncomfortable. Because I've taught him that. I go, sometime you will be uncomfortable. And I'll tell him, if you ask him, if you ever see him and said, hey, sometime you'll be, and he'll say, uncomfortable. And I want him to know that you're not going to be comfortable all the time. You're not going to be feeling good. You're not going to be all right with the world, and you're not going to be satisfied all the time. Sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable. And some of the things, that's some of the things, every time I'm with him, and I try to impart some knowledge, and I'm trying to program it. I'm trying to program that, hey, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're going to be something. And I constantly drive that home to him. And that's what I work on right now with him. He's just a good little kid.
Cletus, I'm so happy you shared that. And it comes at a good time. Every day I write something down on my legal pad that has like all my goals and things that I want to accomplish for the day. It's kind of a governing goal. And this week it's been slow down and enjoy the moment. And yes, I have to stop and remind myself not to get too far thinking in the past and not get too far ahead thinking into the future, because in the past, that's where depression lives. In the future, that's where anxiety lives. Now, I want to have a sharp eye to the future, but I need to be focusing on today and just be grateful for all the things that are going on today. Man, I appreciate you saying that. And then about being uncomfortable, that's, if you can get to a point where when you're comfortable being uncomfortable, man, that is a peace of mind to live in. Yes. And man, that kind of brings us to a good point in the show, where this is, I think, Sammy and I's favorite part and the hardest part of the show. This is where we are going to share with you 3 things that each of us have taken from this conversation.
Okay.
Sammy, I don't know about you, but I got a sheet and a half here to go through.
I got so many notes. And the thing about it is I couldn't write fast enough. I mean, I'm going to have to rewatch this one and transcribe this one to get all the goodness out of it. So
yeah, this has been a good one, but do you want to go first? Or do you want me to lead off?
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so I'm going to take something that you said, Cletus, when you were talking about being in a situation where it's an escalated kind of dangerous situation. You said distance is your friend, build rapport and show that individual that you care. Well, when I heard you say that, I thought about people that I work with. I thought about family members and friends that, we in life, we're always having conflict. Conflict is a part of our lives. And that's just a good 3-step process about when we find ourselves in situations, with people that we're close to, or even if we find ourselves just out in society and, you come across that circumstance where things aren't going well. Distance is your friend, build rapport, and show the people there that you care. And that is a recipe for success. So that was a big takeaway for me.
Okay.
I love that. You stole that one from me, but that's fine. I'll let you have that one. Something I have so many of these, so it's going to be really tough, but I'm going to stick to my top 3. So I think one of the things that you mentioned about that I think this sage wisdom for all walks of life is what you tell other officers and police officers, is that you should be seeking friendship with others that are outside of your niche, outside of other police officers, and seek outlets to kind of even out your life too, right? Because I think so many times people are gravitated to people that are like-minded individuals. But there's so much value, I think, in being able to explore, especially with other people from other walks of life. You said you've got businessmen, you've got executives, you've got truck drivers, you've got hard hats. I mean, it's I think more than ever, one of the reasons why I love this podcast and this show that we do, and I'm a people person, is that I get to meet and understand more people like yourself. I mean, we've had mental health workers, we've had baseball players, we've had a police officer and a detective and a sergeant down too. So I think other people should strive to do that as well. Seek the friendship of others and seek the insight from other people as well that are different from them. And I think that it will help provide a long lasting and a good approach to seeking answers in their life.
Okay.
Cletus, I love when you talked about dress sharp.
Yeah.
And here's why I think that's important. I think people should care about the way they present themselves. I've learned this in my life, that if I take a sloppy and lazy approach to my appearance, I feel sloppy and lazy in life. And that doesn't mean that you've got to be wearing Versace and the newest trends, but like there are very simple things that you can do shopping at Walmart or at Goodwill. Just making sure you feel put together. You know, you're wearing clothes that fit properly. You're presenting yourself to where you feel like you're put together, and you're showing up in a way that other people are going to look at you and say, man, that guy or that woman's put together. And I think that's a big step in terms of growing confidence in ourselves. And so I like how you talked about, you know, when you were a detective, you were like, hey, we're going to make sure we present ourselves well. So when we're showing up, people see it, but we feel it ourselves.
Correct.
One of the biggest things that you said was it was in conjunction with the phrases about the elements of danger that are associated with the types of activities that you get yourself into. And so kind of the sage wisdom there was, and the way that I interpreted it was, careful the path that you choose, and because you are aware of the consequences that could happen. No matter what it is, you know the byproducts in what you're doing. And so I think that's wise. I mean, whether it be, you know, you're going to jump off a cliff into a pond, you never know what's down underneath there, to the company you keep. But I think that's a good awareness, a self-awareness that you should have, that careful the path that you choose, beware the consequences.
Cletus, through this whole conversation, there was one theme that jumped out to me that I wanted to share, and that is you have a no excuses mentality. And you know, you've been through some challenges, you've been through some trials from when you were a very, very young little guy all the way up to the ROTC, getting into the police academy, you know, becoming a detective, going back and forth, just what you're doing now. Man, you're a no excuses kind of guy. And it's refreshing. And you made a comment earlier when you were just talking about police in general, when mistakes happen, own up to the mistakes. And that's just something that I think in our society, so many people do not have that mindset. We're quick to blame others. We're quick to have victim mentality. We're quick to say, well, it wasn't my fault because fill in the blank. I just love your attitude throughout our entire conversation. It was inspiring, and it made an impact on me.
And my last one, which is really, I'm looking at all of my notes. I want to read all my notes, but the last one that I'll pull out is just that phrase that you tell your grandson. And because this is something I'm going to start using on my daughters. I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I love it when I have these shows because I pull so much knowledge out that I can share with them too. But sometimes you will be uncomfortable, and I try and tell them that, and so if they were in here, they would laugh right now because they've heard me say this so many times. I'll say, "Suck it up, Buttercup," you know, like, and that's my phrase, and so they'll know it too because I'll say, "Suck it up," and they'll even repeat Buttercup. But I've never been able to articulate it the way that you did that, so I'm going to use this. Sometimes you'll be uncomfortable, and just have that mindset too. I love that. So thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
Oh man, well, Cletus, this is the end of our show. And so wanted to ask you, is there a way if people have listened to this episode and they're like, man, I want to get in touch with Cletus. Is there a way that people could reach out to connect with you?
Yeah, like I said, you can send me an email. like I said, AUG 1511 at sbcglobal.net. And that's how you can tell how old I am, because I still have an SBC Global email account. And one thing, and I and one thing that we didn't get to, and like I want to say, and like I say, I've made mistakes. I've had some issues in my life, and and things that have went wrong. And like I said, by the grace of God, I've been able to recover and to go through. And I tell people all the time, we all carry some baggage, and we all go through some things, but it's what you do when you go through these things. And like I said, I try to impart that to my sons all the time, and I just, one of the things that, like I said, one of the things that I'm guilty of is I worked a lot when I was raising these boys. My wife did it, because I was hustling. I was always working. And so I look at my grandson as a mulligan, and I get to, whenever he's here, when he's with us and stuff, I spend a lot of time with him and trying to drag him out to the golf course with me. He doesn't care much about golf like he does Fortnite, but I'm saying, it hasn't always been good. And like I said, by no means, and there's an old poem, and I think it was, but it says, life for me ain't been no crystal stairs. But I've not had a hard life, but it hasn't been crystal stairs. But I've been blessed, and I've been blessed with raised by some good folks, met some good folks, tried to do good by folks, and that's where I am, and that's where like I tell people all the time, and Marion Wright Eldon said it, rent, service is the rent we pay for living.
Yes.
I got to pay some rent, because I'm living pretty good. And so I want to thank y'all, man, because this is great, man. And when y'all make it on the big screen, and when y'all have that night show, that TV night show, and call me back and get me on.
Sir.
Yeah. But this is a good deal, man. And I'm going to start, y'all let me know when y'all start posting these, and I'll let my friends know about it. And I think y'all are two good guys, and y'all have, some good things on your minds, and good things to help, broaden people's horizons and help people in their daily walk.
Man, we appreciate that, Cletus, and that's actually a good transition as we kind of start wrapping things up. If people want to find more about the Pursuit of Growth, they can go to our website, which is either thepursuitofgrowth.com or livetpg.com, and there you'll find other episodes of the Pursuit of Growth show. We have a weekly blog that we send out called 1 Minute Matters. And then you can purchase our book that we wrote, that Cletus, what you just mentioned before I started speaking again about going through trials and making mistakes. And man, life hasn't always been an easy path. And that's what the Pursuit of Growth is all about. That's the book that Sammy and I wrote. And so it's been a big part of what we do and where we're going. So thank you for those kind words. And
okay.
Turn it over to Sammy for some last comments.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention was that I feel like we just scraped the surface on a lot of topics in which we can really dive into and really dig into a little bit more. I'd love to have you back on the show soon and maybe touch base on the culture and the community and kind of the current events, because there's so much that was learned here. My mind was racing the whole time, and all I could do was shut up and listen. I felt like that was my duty at this time to soak in. So would love to have you back on. Would love to
sure
conversate over a golf ball here and there, if you don't mind playing from the rough, because I'm terrible.
I'm there too.
Okay. But everyone else, that's watching this show, please, share this out with their friends, their family. And I would ask one thing of the audience too: if you see a police officer or a law enforcement official out there on the streets, just give them a quick nod and tell them, hey, thank you for the time that they're doing for us, and because we know it's a tough job, and I think we can do that all in respect and thanks out of you for the service that you provide to the community.
Yes, sir.
As well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, have a wonderful night, guys, and we'll see y'all again soon.
That's right.
All right.
All right. Peace.